Welcome back, welcome back. We're going to do a book review today. This is one of my favorite books of all time, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and I'm so excited to share it with you guys. I know this book inside and out, upside down. I think every single person on the face of this earth should read it. It is quite literally the first ever romance book in the modern sense of what romance is, at least in Western culture. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Iconic first lines of this book. I think any man who ever wants to understand women better needs to pick up this book. Every single type of women, that would be, okay, anyway. Every single type of woman in the entire world is represented in this book. You have the boy crazy one that makes absolutely no sense. You have the mean ones that only care about money and social status. You have the quiet, beautiful ones who are very nice but don't want to cause a scene. And you have the ones who are more than happy to cause a scene if needed. I think what I love most about this book is the way the romance between the characters, they're not unfounded. They're not just like, oh, he saw her and fell in love and that was just the end of it. Actually, they hate each other in the beginning. Darcy says, she's not handsome enough to tempt me. And Elizabeth says, I could easily have forgiven his pride if he had not mortified mine. What I love too is how in both Darcy and Elizabeth's families, you have sense and reason, you know? Like, it doesn't matter how poor or how wealthy you are, reason is still reason and nonsense is still nonsense. Lady Catherine is very nonsensical. She is very, I don't know, rude, borderline improper, and she thinks it's okay for her to be that way because she has money. And although Elizabeth's mom is not, I don't know, as refined, like she is always losing her head here and there, her aunt and uncle, the Gardners, are very much the opposite. So this book really drives home that no matter how much money or no matter how much status you have in your family, there really is no substitute for good sense. And real good manners have nothing to do with how much money you have. It's not about whether or not you can play the pianoforte or if you know which spoon or fork to use at the table. It's about how you treat people and how you hold yourself. Elizabeth is really intelligent, which I really appreciate, and you can see that in the dialogue itself. I love when authors don't just say, oh, she was really smart. They demonstrate her intelligence by her witty one-liners. For example, Darcy comes up to her and says, I do not have, what does he say exactly? I don't have the gift of conversing well with others whom I've never met before, or whatever he says. Of course, this comes right after Lady Catherine is telling Elizabeth how much practice makes perfect, and Elizabeth is just banging away on the piano, doesn't know how to play, but just playing it really badly. And she looks at him and she says, perhaps you should take your aunt's advice and practice. The other thing I like about this book is how it highlights the importance of not taking first impressions too seriously. For example, Wickham makes a really good first impression and Darcy makes a terrible one because he's just really antisocial, I guess, or whatever. Just because you have good social graces does not mean you are a good person. Wickham is obviously very okay with lying, cheating, and just serving his own best interest, taking advantage of people, whereas Darcy, even though he's not as social or, I guess, courteous of the emotional well-being of others in big social settings, he still does the right thing at the end of the day, even if he doesn't have all of the pretty words that he can say to make people feel as comfortable in a social setting as possible. And then you have Caroline Bingley, right? Who is Mr. Bingley's sister. There are two types of men in this world, right? The men who are a little bit more in tune with how women can be a little bit conniving and schemy, and the men who are completely blissfully and horrifically ignorant to it. Ignorant might not be the right word. Oblivious is the right word, I think. For the men who have a good ability to sense whether a woman is trying to take advantage of him or trying to distract him from what the truth really is, those men are going to have a much easier time in every aspect of their life. Caroline goes out of her way at every point in time to drive these two people apart. In her letters, she's trying to paint this picture to Jane of how, her brother and Darcy's sister are getting along so well together, and we really look forward to our families joining or whatever. Jane goes to London, and of course Caroline goes out of her way to make sure that her brother has no idea that she's in London. And since Darcy is so blinded by his prejudice for Elizabeth and her family, he very easily just plays right into this and helps Caroline basically keep her brother away from Jane. So if you combine the conniving nature of some women with a man's own personal weaknesses, you can see how reality can get very skewed, and it can really make a mess for a lot of people, including that man himself. Elizabeth is blinded by her pride. She thinks that, okay, Darcy is obviously a terrible person based on the things that she has heard about him and based on the way that he has acted with her, which is fair. If someone acts like a horrible person and, you hear things about him that reinforce the way that your interactions with that person have gone, then yes, people are going to think that you are that person. And I think that is such a good lesson and kind of a call for everyone to just act in such a way that if someone said something bad about you, no one would be able to believe it. However, you can never use the fact that somebody is a horrible person. Darcy is not a horrible person, but even if you were a horrible person, you can't put yourself on a pedestal above them. And Elizabeth does this, which is how her pride blinds her to the truth. And then Darcy proposes to her. He proposes to her, and of course she says no because she thinks he's a horrible person. And he thinks, first of all, I'm not a horrible person. He thinks that, of course. And two, I have a ton of money and she's rejecting me? What? This is another great concept in this book, this idea of standing by your values. It doesn't matter how much money someone has. At the end of the day, he wronged her sister and Mr. Wickham, which means that he's a bad person. Now that is only half true, of course, because she doesn't have all of the information, because Wickham is actually the real bad person with good social graces, and Darcy is the good person with bad social graces. But the two of them, despite all of this, are still able to talk it out, make things right, acknowledge that they were wrong in some ways and maybe right in others, and they're able to, one, forgive each other, and two, not make too much of a mess out of the whole thing. They don't sit here trying to get revenge or be toxic. They just acknowledge, okay, maybe I was wrong and maybe he was wrong or she was wrong, but at the end of the day, the truth is really what matters, and you can just kind of make things right and move on and be happy. Darcy is very much a gentleman in the way that he just takes care of everything that happens with Lydia. He takes responsibility for whatever happened with Wickham in the past, and he goes above and beyond, which today would be considered above and beyond, but really it's just basic gentlemanly chivalry. He does this to make up for all of the wrongs that he has done Elizabeth in the past. He very cleanly rejects Caroline's advances on him. He doesn't try to make Elizabeth jealous or anything like that. Like, Caroline keeps insulting Elizabeth and saying, oh, like, she's very plain and ordinary or whatever. And he said, I think she's the handsomest woman in the world or whatever. I'm paraphrasing a lot of this. I hope you guys don't mind that. Then you have Elizabeth's friend Charlotte, who in many ways just kind of settles for Mr. Collins. She's not very romantic. She's not really looking for like some deep love connection. She's just looking for comfort and companionship. And there are women like that too. And it's a shock to Elizabeth because she's not like that at all, but it doesn't affect their friendship. And I think that is wonderful too, that you can have different people who believe different things who can still be friends. Elizabeth's mom really wants Elizabeth to accept Colin's proposal to Elizabeth, which Colin eventually ends up marrying Charlotte, but he first proposes to Elizabeth, and this is Elizabeth's first proposal. This could save their family's house or whatever. But Elizabeth does not like this man at all, and she just, on that alone, that's enough for her to say, no, I don't want that. I don't care if this is going to save everyone. I am not doing that. And I think it's great when her father says, when her mother says, she has to marry him or I'll never speak to her again. And her father says, you have a very hard decision here. Your mother will not speak to you again if you don't marry Mr. Collins, and I will never speak to you again if you do. And it says that her father himself is very relieved that Elizabeth has more sense than Charlotte, because Charlotte just takes the comfort when Mr. Collins gives it to her, gives her that opportunity to have financial stability and be comfortable. You know, she doesn't particularly love him. He's a little ridiculous, but, you know, she's not looking for that, and that's okay. She's in a very different circumstance than Elizabeth is, and we all have to just kind of respect each other's points of view. Again, this is one of my favorite books ever. I could talk about it for hours. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. So give it a read and let me know what you guys think.